All right. Well, it's been about a month since the biggest chunk yet of the Epstein files was released. Um, since then, there's been a lot of talk about the names of the different people that are on the list, the different prominent politicians and scientists and authors, and basically people from every field you can think of. Um, but obviously, one of the most prominent um, names on the list is Donald Trump. It's been kind of known that he was mentioned on the list for a while, but um, so far the 3 million plus that came out, his name was mentioned over 38,000 times, which is I think at least like 3 times higher than whoever's next. I'm sure I'm wrong on that, but it's definitely, more than anyone else was mentioned. So, a lot of people are, looking at Donald Trump like maybe perhaps he was just a client, someone that was kinda like Bill Clinton, um, or I don't know, Alan Dershowitz or Prince Andrews, one of these other people that were, um, just using Jeffrey Epstein's services, I guess you could say. But, an angle I haven't seen too many people look, at the Epstein files from, or Donald Trump's involvement specifically, is was he just a client, or was he actually involved in the blackmailing himself? Um, I put together a presentation I'll go over. There's a lot of different things throughout Donald Trump's past that kind of make you wonder, maybe he's more involved than just getting some young um, women, I guess you could you would say, from Jeffrey Epstein. So I'll go ahead and start with that here. All right. So obviously, that's the main focus. Is Trump's involvement, and so the first little part that I wanted to talk about here kind of revolves around. Of course, I've mentioned it a bunch. I'm probably going to keep mentioning it. Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail. Um, in volume one, it kind of focuses on um, starting around World War II with Operation Underworld and the mob and mafia, the Italian mafia, starting to work with the government, the U.S. government during World War II, as far as like controlling the ports and stuff like that for German boats and different stuff like that. So one of the biggest people in the mafia was Meyer Lansky here. He was kind of like the brains, I guess you could say, of the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia. He was Jewish. He never spent any time in prison, died old man free. So he was clearly pretty good at getting away with crimes. But one of the things it talks about in One Nation Under Blackmail is how Meyer Lansky was involved with getting blackmail on J. Edgar Hoover over here, who was basically the like godfather, the founding father of the FBI. He was the director for like 50 years almost. Um, but here at the Plaza Hotel, there used to be um, parties hosted by this guy down here, Roy Cohn, who was Donald Trump's mentor, basically, kind of taught him everything. Donald Trump would call him, 5, 6 times a day, all kinds of stuff. But Roy Cohn there would host parties at the Plaza Hotel, and they would have young boys, young women, drugs, all kinds of things like that. But they were called the Blue Room parties, or that's what they were kind of known as, is the Blue Room parties or the Blue Suite parties. But there had been cameras, hidden cameras put in there by, at kind of Meyer Lansky's orders, um, to get blackmail on different people, and specifically J. Edgar Hoover. So getting blackmail over the FBI director kind of allowed them, the mafia, to have a little bit of free reign um, in their different crimes. But Roy Cohn was also heavily involved with kind of putting on the parties and hosting the parties at different places. He would also like host them at his own house, whatever. I'm pretty sure, but there was a lot of involvement with blackmail, and he was also like got some of the blackmail that had been obtained um, of J. Edgar Hoover, and he was known to do it to other like business, I guess you could say, associates, and different things like that. And Roy Cohn was also a lawyer for some mobsters like Tony Salerno, and I think Paul Castellano. So he was definitely involved with, or had connections to, the mob and the mafia. Um, and later on, Donald Trump actually ended up buying the Plaza Hotel. And I'll touch on it. I have some of a reading I'll do towards the end, but um, he Donald Trump had bought the Plaza Hotel, and he was kind of known to put on similar parties, like Roy Cohn had, with young um, people and drugs and different things like that. And Trump is famously known, or it's well known, that he is doesn't do drugs, doesn't drink, um, but clearly he's, I guess you would say, a sexual deviant or something. That could be, I guess that's his addiction. But maybe that's, part of the reason he doesn't, or hasn't partaken in drugs and alcohol and stuff. He said it was because his brother died from an overdose, or whatever, but maybe it's because he knows what happens at parties when you want to start getting all um, lit up, and then, you know, people start getting recordings of you. Um, so then another connection down here that kind of is suspicious, or makes me think that Donald Trump may have been involved with blackmail himself, um, was he had actually bought a yacht, not directly from Adnan Khashoggi, but Adnan Khashoggi, who was a huge arms dealer, probably the world's biggest arms dealer from Saudi Arabia. His family, his dad, I think, was a physician for the king, or prince of Saudi Arabia. I guess it would be the king of Saudi Arabia. Um, and he is one of the top names associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Um, but Donald Trump had actually bought the yacht from the Sultan of Hassan al Bolkiah of Brunei. Sultan Hassan al Bolkiah of Brunei, however the hell you pronounce that. Um, and here's the yacht itself. It was called the Nabila, and Trump renamed it the Trump Princess. But here's a clip of him actually talking about it on David Letterman's show.
Publicity about your acquisition of the boat this summer. The Princess, is that what
I
I call
bought a
it?
boat from Adnan Khashoggi, which was formerly called the Nabila. And
Nabila.
It's a yacht. And
Adnan Khashoggi, excuse me for a second, is the world's largest arms trader?
I hate to admit it. Actually, it was from the Sultan of Brunei because he was security for a loan and a whole complicated thing. But
Now, what are those guys like?
oh, they're real sweethearts, I have to tell you. They're real sweethearts.
Are they mean, tough, foreboding guys?
Well, I'd say by nature, they're not the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah.
He spent probably $200 million on building this yacht, which was called the Nabila, as I said, and probably the greatest yacht ever built. And I purchased it for a business. I have a real problem using it personally, because a mental problem using it personally. I feel guilty about it, if you want to know the truth. But I purchased it, and I use it for my hotels and for condo people that want to use it and this and that. And It's really been a great kind of an investment. It's been fun. I use it for charities. I use it for a lot of different charities. where
And
we
you,
have-
you
So there he talks about having a mental problem using it, probably because he knows where it came from and what's involved with it. But this one is this yacht. Whitney Webb's talked about it, and other journalists who have covered the Jeffrey Epstein case and Adnan Khashoggi and all that. Adnan Khashoggi was also known to be to use blackmail, specifically like on the yacht. For instance, he would throw these parties with drugs and have all these women around, and I'm sure there was underage ones. Um, and even if there wasn't, getting videos of prominent people doing drugs or having affairs or whatever it may be can be enough to kind of get some leverage on someone, some control. Um, but there was also different. He believed in um, that you could have 11 wives. I think it was three for like love, and the rest were for pleasure. He had pleasure wives, um, and he had like 11 bedrooms on the yacht. And then I saw it was reported there was like a mortuary with like coffins and stuff, like 7 coffins or something like that. So it's like, I mean, I don't know why you would need coffins on your yacht unless you're doing some shady stuff, and I guess you're having people OD or you're intentionally whacking some people. Like he was an arms dealer, shady people like Donald Trump mentioned in that video. Those are shady people involved with some pretty bad things. So um, there could be more to that. It's just a little more interesting. And Adnan Khashoggi was known to have ties to the Mossad, like Israeli intelligence, um, different stuff like that. So over here, the next little subtopic, I guess, would be something that made it seem like Donald Trump may have been more involved, other than just being a client. Um, of Jeffrey Epstein's there was plenty of times where they were seen socially. Although from what I've read on different reports and stuff like that, it seems like Donald Trump was mostly associated with Epstein and Maxwell, primarily because of Ghislaine Maxwell. Donald Trump, had hung out, been seen, photographed with Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine's dad, on his yacht. I think it was the Princess Ghislaine, or Lady Ghislaine, something like that. Um, but so Donald Trump had already kind of had associations with Ghislaine beforehand, and that's likely how he became connected with Jeffrey Epstein. And then, there's rumors that Melania here was kind of set up with Donald Trump from Jeffrey Epstein because he had, you know, connections to all these different modeling agencies, foreign modeling agencies in Eastern Europe and, I mean, all throughout the world. But um, and then over here, I put Mar-a-Lago, which is in Palm Beach, Florida, where Jeffrey Epstein first got arrested, where he got the sweetheart deal and everything like that in Palm Beach, Florida. And him and Trump were neighbors. But besides Jeffrey Epstein going to Mar-a-Lago, um, there was Virginia Giuffre here, who just died within the past year or two. Her death was pretty suspicious if you look into it, but she was one of the main, um, not whistleblowers, like victims that came out and were outspoken about Jeffrey Epstein and all the different abuses he had done, and to her and to all these other girls. And she was one of the biggest voices. And she, like I said, died under some really suspicious circumstances. But she had actually worked at Mar-a-Lago, which most people know by now. Um, and here she is seen with Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew. Now I think it's like Windsor, Badminton, some I don't know, badminton something, something stupid. But um, so there was some social connections besides it. It wasn't just business arrangements. It would seem, or if there was, it was known that Jeffrey Epstein would kind of try to recruit girls from Mar-a-Lago, and supposedly that's why Donald Trump kicked him out. Um, and here you can kind of see, leading into the next one, where I have informant. Um, there there is rumors, supposedly, that um, why is that? Why is that so there? That Donald Trump was actually an informant who was working, or who had tipped off the FBI that they should look into Jeffrey Epstein and all this type of stuff. Um, but again, and here you can see um, Donald Trump, and that's Robert Maxwell, media mogul Robert Maxwell, cable news executive Steve Ross, and CBS reporter Mike Wallace in the wheelhouse of the lady Ghislaine during the 1989 party. And here's Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein again seen at a party. That's from like a pretty well-known video, one of the main videos of them together. But something else. Well, let me see. I think I'll client. So I guess I'll show this clip first about the possible rumors that he could have been an informant.
So, do you think Trump and Epstein were beauty pageant predator partners in crime?
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some stuff that's in the Epstein files that have come out that seem credible, and Trump has zero scruples. So yeah, I wouldn't put it past him. But there's also those stories going around that he's the one who reported him to the Palm Beach Police Department and all that stuff. I don't know about that, but Donald Trump is definitely seems like he's compromised. They have blackmail on him. So if he's not, if they don't have it on him, he's completely done a 180 on everything he's said for the last 20 years about the Middle East wars and how they're the biggest disasters we've ever done, and we should have never gotten that war.
So, do you think Trump and Epstein were beauty
All right.
pageant predator
Um,
partners in crime?
So there, Jimmy kind of touched on all three different aspects: client, informant, or blackmailer. Those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Donald Trump could have been a client, a blackmailer, and an informant in different times, different aspects, all at the same time. Who knows? As people are starting to learn, the world's a lot more complicated than they've thought it has been. But at the beginning of that clip, Jimmy had mentioned, or Sean Atwood had said something about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump being beauty pageant partners in crime. Another thing that made me think he could have been more involved than, just being a client, Donald Trump being more involved, would be he was the owner of Miss Universe and Miss Teen USA. And it's known that Jeffrey Epstein recruited, from different pageants. There was rumors that they had a private pageant of like 20 women or girls, whatever, Um, but and then there was also, I saw there was some rumor, or there was a quote of uh, Donald Trump talking about Miss Teen USA and how he owned it, so that gave him the right to go in the back room, or something in the locker room, something along those lines. That's not verbatim. Uh, Jesus, what is going on? I was tweaking for a second. But with Donald Trump being the owner of Miss Universe, Miss Teen USA, Jeffrey Epstein using pageants, notoriously Victoria's Secret, he pretended to be a recruiter to try to, lure victims in. And something else I thought was pretty peculiar that heard in this other video that I'm going to show here in a second, about Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter, who he's said some weird stuff about before. She started modeling for the Elite Model Management when she was 15 years old, and that was her I guess you would say agent or representative was this guy named John Casablancas. And it says down here, Casablancas was friends with Donald Trump, and Elite Model Management represented his daughter Ivanka when she became a fashion model at age 15. Now, if you go up a little bit, now this is Wikipedia, so it's not like the best source, but it's a good starter point. This part is it's where it gets kind of weird. According to British newspaper The Guardian, Casablancas was frank about his personal preference for girls of only just legal age, child women. His relationships were far beyond complicated, though he denied the rumors that he had charmed entire portfolios of elite employees into bed. At the age of 42, Casablancas began dating 14-year-old Stephanie Seymour while he was married to model Jeanette Christensen. In 1993, the 50-year-old Casablancas married his third wife, 17-year-old Aline Mendonca de Carvalho Wermelinger. Damn, it's a long-ass name. Winner of Elite Model Look 1992 in Brazil, who he had met as a schoolgirl. Wermelinger was close in age to Casablancas' children, who were 22 and 14 at the time. The couple had 3 children. So he liked child women, was friends with Donald Trump, and represented Donald Trump's 15-year-old daughter when she began her modeling career. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think for yourself? And then here it mentions Epstein, ties to Epstein. During the 90s, he allegedly sent a teenage model, to Epstein's private residence. The model was 15 at the time, was ordered by Epstein to undress while he took photographs of her, pushed her against the wall, and sexually assaulted her. Nice. Nice. So there's that. And then let me see. I wanted to read there was a couple of snippets from Whitney Webb's volume 2 right here that I wanted to read also. Let me see. I'll skip around. It's going to be a decent amount. So it says, Trump very much appeared to exist in the Robert Maxwell orbit, having been photographed attending parties in the late 1980s, hosted by the media baron intelligence asset on his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. I already showed the pictures of that. In 1988, Trump purchased the Plaza Hotel, once the site of sexual blackmail parties involving minors that had intimately involved Roy Cohn. As I'd already talked about, Roy Cohn was Donald Trump's kind of mentor, all this type of stuff. Cohn was not only Trump's lawyer, but his mentor and friend, and the two men regularly partied together. Cohn's former switchboard operator, Christine Seymour, claimed that prior to Cohn's 1986 death, Trump called Cohn regularly, up to 5 times a day. Cohn is also alleged to have aided in the judicial career of Trump's sister, Marianne Trump Barry. After purchasing the Plaza Hotel, it would be reported and confirmed by then attendees that Trump used to host parties and suites at the Plaza Hotel when he owned it, where young women and girls were introduced to older, richer men, and illegal drugs and young women were passed around and used. Andy Lucchese, a male model who had helped organize some of these Plaza Hotel parties for Trump, said the following when asked about the age of the women present. A lot of girls, 14, look 24. That's as juicy as I can get. I never asked how old they were. I just partook. I did partake in activities that would be controversial too. Some authors, such as Michael Wolff, have alleged that during the late 1980s and early 1990s, Trump and Epstein, along with Tom Barrack, were a set of nightlife musketeers who frequently partied together. Then this is the last part. In 1990, Epstein bought a home in Palm Beach, making him Trump's neighbor. This suggests that at the very least, the two men became even better acquainted after that purchase. So that kind of covered all the things I'd already mentioned in the first few sections. Kind of brought it all together. And here's the last little thing that I guess I'll show is a clip of Whitney Webb herself. I've talked about her a lot, so now you'll be able to see her. But here she was on a podcast I've never really listened to before, but I just saw the clip or found the clip and thought it was pretty good. But here she is kind of talking about the Black Book, Epstein's Black Book, which kind of inspired the name for my channel, Blake's Black Book. Except that's not because of other, it's just because it's bad stuff in there. It's stuff that's not supposed to be talked about. Okay. But either way, this was a clip of her, Whitney Webb, talking to this lady about the Black Book that had most of Epstein's contacts with names, numbers, addresses, and Nick Bryant, who was an author that I read his book, The Franklin Scandal, about a similar Epstein-esque scandal that happened back in the 80s. He had obtained the Black Book and then had actually been the one that published it. So here's Whitney kind of talking about that.
That book became public. Well, it was originally published and made actually public by the investigative journalist Nick Bryant, who's also known for investigating the Franklin scandal, which is sort of a Reagan-Bush era pedophile scandal involving government officials. And he published that at Gawker, I believe, in 2015, but he came into possession of it sometime, I think, around 2012 or so, he said. But prior to that, the FBI obtained it from Jeffrey Epstein's former butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, who died the same year it was published in 2015. But earlier, he had tried to basically sell the Black Book, initially to one of the victims' lawyers, Brad Edwards, who works with Stanley Pottinger at, I forget the name of their law firm, but they're two of the main Epstein lawyers. And so instead of buying the book, I mean, obviously, it's fair that he wouldn't pay an enormous, the large sum that Rodriguez was asking for it. But Edwards instead tipped off the FBI and basically sicked the FBI on this guy. And the FBI set up a sting operation to buy the book from him, and Rodriguez went to prison, which later Epstein, when he was asked about it, said about the Black Book, he was like, it never should have been published. It was terrible that it was published, but now my butler, or, my former butler is in prison for, the crime of publishing it. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. It's not a direct quote, but that was essentially what he was saying. So he agreed with, Rodriguez being put away. And it's important to point out that Epstein was an FBI informant during this period. So, there may have been some duplicity there, but again, I don't know. But what's important here is that Rodriguez, when he tried to shop this book around, he circled names that he said were co-conspirators and material witnesses to Epstein's sex trafficking crimes. So Flavio Briatore is one of the circled names. Alan Dershowitz is a circled name. Leslie Wexner, Jean-Luc Brunel, who is the French accomplice of Epstein that died in prison while awaiting trial in 2022. And then Donald Trump is also a circled name, which oddly enough hasn't really gotten a lot of coverage over the years. Nick Bryant, of course, talked about that, but a lot of people act like Trump was never accused. And then Brad Edwards later went out and said to Derek Rose, when he was interviewed by him, that Trump had actually been very helpful. But of course, Trump and Epstein at that point had a personal falling out. And also Brad Edwards' law partner, Stanley Pottinger, has kind of a suspect history, sort of acting like the Democrat equivalent of William Barr, which is basically a mop-up man for government scandals. Over the course of his lengthy career as a lawyer working on behalf of the government and the Department of Justice. So there's a lot of question marks there.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm following the implications. So in this book that Epstein's former butler was trying to shop and got caught up in the sting operation, there were a number of circled names that were supposed to indicate
material witnesses and co-conspirators and enablers, I guess.
To the sex trafficking.
Yes. But Rodriguez didn't specify why he circled those names, and he died the year that the book was published by Gawker and also in prison. And I'm not really sure there's any information on the circumstances of his death. And that's also, of course, the year that Donald Trump declares his candidacy for president.
Okay, so the implication, the implication is that this butler knew and identified Donald Trump as being not just sort of, not to minimize it, but a visitor to the island or a friend of Epstein, but someone who was a material witness and were deeply implicated in this. That man, the butler, dies in prison the year that Donald Trump announces his candidacy for president in 2015. Okay, and moreover, you alluded to Epstein himself being an FBI agent.
Or
And what-
informant. not agent.
informant, sorry, informant. Can you tell us more about how we know that to be true, and also what the implications are then for this sort of scenario that you set up, where, you know, like I'm just gonna say, where the implication is that Donald Trump benefited enormously from this being buried because of the death of the man who circled him and fingered him as being substantively implicated in Jeffrey Epstein's
Yeah,
sex
I
trafficking.
mean, no one can interview Alfredo Rodriguez now about why he chose to circle Trump's name or Briatore's name or any of these other figures. Courtney Love was also a circled name.
Interesting. What do we think that's about? Just she was there,
Hard
she
to
saw?
know. Some authors have speculated that, you know, through her father, who was a road manager for the Grateful Dead, that she was sort of brought into this weird circle of intelligence linked stuff, since authors more recently have sort of pointed to that band and some of these other groups in the 60s of having, you know, CIA and other suspect connections, and sort of that a lot of the 60s counterculture was engineered for various purposes. But I'm not an expert on that, so I don't really want to speculate too much. But that's sort of been the I believe Covert Action magazine, actually, and I forget who the author was, so sorry about that. But they have a whole article detailing alleged ties between Courtney Love and some nefarious actors. So I'll refer people to that. I read it once,
And
but I wasn't, you know, I didn't absorb
fair
it enough,
enough.
I guess.
When the way that you rattle off all of these facts and names, I don't think there's a single person listening that would judge you for not remembering the name of one magazine. Talk about one
Well, I
article at
also
some point
just
about
had
Courtney Love.
I also have a very young baby at home, so I'm sleep deprived, so that may influence things a little bit.
Even more of a credit to you, frankly. So,
Oh, thanks.
so I feel like I have to ask: is there any reason to sort of doubt the credibility or the motives of this Epstein butler, especially since he was caught trying to sort of like personally profit from the sale of this book?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but at the time, Trump was not a political candidate, and a lot of the other names that are circled are people that are well known to have been accomplices to the crime, like Maxwell, like Jean-Luc Brunel, Leslie Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's main benefactor. And we also do know, for example, that the most famous Epstein victim of all, who died earlier this year, Virginia Roberts, she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell while working at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. So there's a possibility that there may have been something there. But again, we don't really know because we can't ask the guy. But it is convenient that he cannot be asked. But there you
And there
go.
was no investigation.
So there you go. Whitney kind of summed up a lot of things there. But all in all, I think looking at kind of all the evidence combined, plus more that I didn't include here, it just makes me question a little more of a little more what was Trump's actual involvement with Epstein. Um, I'm, I'm sure he was a client, an informant. I'm not so sure there. Whitney in that last video kind of mentioned there was rumors of Epstein being an FBI informant. I mean, I don't know. I could see him. I don't know why he would necessarily need to be an informant if he was kind of working for these intelligence agencies. But all in all, with looking at all the evidence, it just kind of makes me a little more curious as what was Trump's actual involvement? What were his motives? Did he was he involved in blackmailing himself? Was that part of the reason he didn't drink or do drugs or anything? Is because he wanted to have the upper hand to be able to get this material on different business associates, competitors. He was known in New York and Palm City, which it was also in the Whitney Webb's book there. Those are two locations known for money laundering, and him and his family, like Jared Kushner, has long been accused of being involved with money laundering. I think Jared Kushner's dad actually went to prison for like money laundering or fraud. Another thing is it's came out, it's known that Jeffrey Epstein was some sort of intelligence broker, I've heard said, for not necessarily an agent, but a broker for these different intelligence agencies for different countries. He kind of was a free agent, whether it was the CIA or Israel and the Mossad, or Russia and the KGB, or the Saudi intelligence, or whoever I think was willing to pay the best price or give the best deal or had the most incentive. It seemed like he just kind of was involved with all the different intelligence agencies, French, British. Um, so, with that being said, um, Donald Trump clearly is a bitch for Israel. He's a cuck for Benjamin Netanyahu and um, Marion Adelson, and um, all the money that's been given to him. And I mean, I voted for the motherfucker. I've said that before, and I'll keep saying it because I mean, it is what it is. I don't think Kamala necessarily would have been a better option. I think not voting would have been the best option if I could um, go back to the 2024 election. But at the end of the day, I voted for the fucker. But besides going back on all the lies on, not getting involved in any other wars, trying to end the wars, trying to make living more affordable for people, especially like our generation, my generation, um, Gen Z, people that can't afford houses, and people that have student debt and our medical debt and all this type of stuff. Um, yeah, besides all that, you know, he's just been a complete failure for everything that I was hoping for. But you got to be honest, and you know, like I said, I think there's just maybe more to look at here than just um, was Donald Trump a just a client? Was he someone that was actually um, involved in the same operations or similar operations himself? Um, so I think that'll do it. If you've made it this far, please like, subscribe, share, um, and I guess I will see you in the next one.